of the child you babysat. So what happened? Reading this made me realize I should have called social workers on a mum I used to babysit for. She had 2 kids and a nephew that she'd also leave with me. They had one single mattress between the 3 of them while the mum had her own room. The house was always a mess in the same way you described, and there was so little food that I started bringing food with me so that they wouldn't go hungry. The mum would always get home at least an hour after she was meant to, but never paid me for the extra and used to leave her kids with their nan more often than she'd actually spend time with them. I guess I excused all this behavior because I sympathized with her being a single mum. I haven't babysat for her in over 6 months, but if ever do again I think I might have to call someone. My mom ran a day home when I was 5 or 6. One of the kids, who was a few years older than me, kept trying to play a game with other kids where they get naked under the covers. He also kept crapping his pants. Like every day. My parents talked to him about it and wound up calling the equivalent of Child Protective Services on the parents. It turned out his mom's new boyfriend was molesting him basically every day. It broke my parents' hearts. I'm not sure what happened to him after that. I hope he's doing okay. Edit. My mom stopped running her day home after that and went into teaching adults. She had a master's in early childhood development but says she couldn't bear to be the caretaker for children anymore. Having to tell that boy's mother what she suspected was happening broke her a little. Yes. She had baby formula next to a meth pipe on the counter. I was young and couldn't get the baby to stop crying, so I called her and she sent some random girl over. The random girl revealed that there was a toddler asleep in the back that I didn't know about. I told my mom and she called CPS and the cops. Turns out the woman had like 2 or 3 more kids that she wasn't allowed to see. When I was young, my babysitter had to call the police twice. Once because my mom, who had limited visits with us 3 kids, came banging on her door to get us and take us who knows where. Babysitter hid us in a closet and called the cops. Second time was when we were playing hide and seek in the apartment courtyard and my brother took hide and seek a little too seriously. He refused to come out from his hiding spot and then some person said they saw him leaving with a strange man. Finally, after the cops showed up, he came out from under some bushes proud that not even the cops could find him. I had the police while babysitting. Parents got into an accident and fled the scene. Police caught up to them in their driveway. The cops came to the door and told me to keep the kids in the back of the house so they wouldn't have to see the lights or the parents getting arrested. I agreed to stay until the grandparents got to the house. Obligatory edit. Thanks for my first awards, kind Reddit strangers. My parents had CPS called on them when I was a baby because I had really bad diaper rash that bled a bit. And the way my diaper absorbed the blood made it look like way more than there actually was, so she thought I was being sexually abused. CPS had a doctor examine me and determined that I wasn't being sexually abused, and that was all. My mom told me about it in my 20s. My parents also had CPS called on them when I was a baby. I was colicky baby. And my parents' office was in our house. They are a small publisher, so not an office that has walk-in customers. My mom was out and was just my dad home, and apparently I was being particularly fussy, so he was laying in bed with me on his chest trying to soothe me, and a client that is a particular pain in the ass came unannounced. So my dad just ignored her and continued to try and soothe me. She called CPS stating that my parents had left me alone at the house. But it was thrown out right away cause as soon as they came my dad could name the person who anonymously called and the date and time cause he was there with me and just didn't feel like dealing with her cause he was busy with me. Years ago I babysat 2 kids. 10 and 7. The 10-year-old was threatening us and threw his little sister out of the house. I followed and he locked us both out. Wisconsin winter. No shoes. It was near home. So I brought the girl to my place. But couldn't leave a crazy kid alone. So I returned and he let me stay with him until parents returned. This was before cell phones. I was paid $1 an hour. Tops. No apology. No sugary sodas. No maraschino cherries in the door of the fridge. Parents were wealthy. A couple years later the boy set fire to himself. I regret not doing more. But honestly, I'll never understand why his parents didn't do more. Oh, and one time my sister was babysitting for our French teacher and her ex-husband stormed in and passed out drunk on the couch and she had to call the police because he was not supposed to be there. Yikes. That's a lot. And X200B. The summer I was 17. I was recommended to babysit for this family with 2 young boys, 7/8 and 11/12. I showed up for my second day like I did the day before and the mom left to go to work. The younger boy was arguing with the older boy because he wanted to play on his iPhone. The older one was telling him that he couldn't play. I thought we were alone in the house. All of a sudden an angry large man walks down the stairs and starts yelling, "Hunter, give me your phone or I'm going to whoop you." I did not know that the dad was home. He came down without acknowledging me and whacked the younger boy so hard. I froze. I was scared he was going to hit me. He just had that angry look in his eyes. The dad never once introduced himself to me and no one ever told me that the dad would be home. And X200B. I almost called CPS once. I ended up telling the boy's friend's mom to watch out for them and explained what happened. She said that she has never met the dad. He never comes to the kids' soccer or baseball games. I was babysitting a 5-year-old. I let him download an app and said if your parents say to take it off you have to listen. I went to the bathroom when the parents came home. Once I got out of the bathroom I saw his dad punch him in the stomach about 13 times yelling, "I told you not to download apps." I called the cops. They came. I didn't babysit that family again. Not quite what was asked. But one time a small tornado hit next to our house while the babysitter was at our house. I got a frantic call from the babysitter where she kept repeating, "Your tree is in the driveway." It must have been pretty scary as the tree barely missed the house. We headed home immediately but it took forever because trees were down all over the neighborhood and all the traffic lights were out. We tipped generously. The toddler was completely unfazed and having a great time playing with flashlights. This isn't personal experience but this was told by my friend. So, we have FM equals friend's mum and C equals child. So FM was a babysitter. She had constantly looked after one kid as their parents had a lot of work to do. One time, the C asked what consent was. And then FM explains it all and everything. And at the end, FM said it's always okay to say no to sex. I think we can see where this is going but just in case you don't. The child then said even to family? I had to call 911 while I was being babysat by my grandma as a kid because she had a stroke. I recognized the symptoms from the Babysitters Club. Fortunately, she made a full recovery and is still doing fine almost 20 years later. Claudia and Mean Janine and Claudia and the Sad Goodbye gave me the feels back when I was a kid. Some of those books had real talk storylines. Reverse story here. When I was around 8 I called the police while being babysat. What was the reason for that, you may ask? Simply because I wanted to see what happens when you call the police. I immediately hung up when the dispatcher answered and no more than 10 minutes later a policeman showed up at our house. Our poor babysitter must have been scared to death. But she handled it well. I did get a lecture after that to only call the police if there's an emergency. Technically my son's story. But I will share as he is still a minor. He had a friend over who was a little younger than him. My son was 10. His friend, 8. I asked the boy's mom if it was okay to run to the store. Rural neighborhood. Legally okay. Mature kids, she said it was fine. Took my youngest with me. My son calls me and says that I need to get home immediately. His friend had put on porn and wanted him to watch it. I told him I was on my way home and to tell his friend to turn it off. He said, "You don't understand, Mom." He told me that his dad does that stuff to him. My heart sank. I called the kid's mom and had her come to my house alone. I told her that I had to report it whether she was going to move forward with it or not. I reported it to the state, mandated reporter in obvious duty. The mom pressed charges and now the bastard is in jail. I remind my kid how much of a hero he is. Sometimes he worries that he broke up a family but knows he did the right thing. This is not an answer to your question. but somewhat related. My partner knew a family that hired a teenage girl to babysit their 3 young children. She was exhausted from schoolwork and at some point fell asleep. 2 of the children, 2-3 years old, managed to get outside. And both drowned in a small pond. I don't know what happened to the babysitter or the family afterwards. So sad. Thank the Lord no for me having to. Neighbor called the cops on me though cause my son ran outside while I was going poop twice because he learned how to unlock the door. We installed better higher locks now. But hadn't at the time and it was scary, but I'm kinda grateful they did. Lets me know someone was watching out for him. I'd rather they just come talk to me, but hey COVID. So this isn't exactly babysitting, but I mean it was kind of free babysitting. But when I was 12 I was at the park and I met a girl my age and her and I were on the swings when this little 5 or so year old asked if she could play with us. Her dad was also there watching her. We wanted to be nice to her so we played with her for a little while. Pushed her on the swings, that kind of stuff. Well, when her dad said it was time to go home the girl made a fuss and started crying. Her dad had to basically drag her home. They were walking across the field, still in our sight, to their house when the dad picked up a large stick and hit her with it. He then carried the stick back to their home and tossed it in the garbage can when he got there. At the time I didn't own a phone, but the other girl I had met had one. I told her to call the police but she refused. I asked if I could borrow their phone and I would call the police. She agreed and I called then and told them what happened. About 10 minutes later they showed up to the house. I saw them look in the garbage bag and pull out the stick. Then they knocked on the door. IDK whatever became of that. My sister was babysitting 2 younger kids that lived around the neighborhood. She called my parents in the middle of the night freaking out saying she couldn't find one of the kids. They weren't in their bed. My dad was going to go over there because my sister was frantic. Turns out the kid left his room and buried himself in the giant comforter of the parents' king bed. My sister ended up finding him before my dad even left to go over there. It was definitely tense. Apparently the mother knew the kid would do that and forgot to tell my sister. Needless to say, cops weren't called, but was definitely a stressful situation. My sister never babysat for them again. I am a babysitter and used to work at a daycare. The assistant director and I had to call the police once because a child was left behind over an hour after closing time. We were afraid her mom had been in an accident or something. Turns out there was a miscommunication between mom and dad regarding pickup. I really just think the dad forgot about her, as the mom was always the one picking up. It makes me sad to think that her dad forgot her. As sad as it sounds, it's easily done if it's not part of your usual routine and you have a lot going on to think about or are in a rush. The child, 4, was running around naked and I was trying to clothe him, and his sister, 6, said it's funny when he comes naked to the table daddy sticks his pee-pee in his mouth. I asked her to elaborate and her twin sister elbowed her and said we aren't supposed to talk about that. No. But I should have done so. I minded a little girl and her dad would come home drunk each night. He was a friend of the family and I wasn't in any fear whatsoever. But it just creeped me out that he was sloshed with an infant for the 2 hours he was home alone until his wife got there. I often would say, "Hey, I'm almost done with my homework. Mind if I stay?" instead of leaving just because some nights he couldn't stand up. And yes, he was driving this way. It was the early 80s. Not me but my friend. Kid was doing crack in his parents' bedroom. The kid was f***ing 14. I met a guy in a mental institution whose mom started doing crack with him at age 11. Not surprising he ended up there. My GF told me this story. Back in high school, she did babysitting as her job. There was this one kid she babysat who seemed to like her a whole lot more than his parents. The parents had a pretty nice house, with a few small things here and there but nothing too bad. One day, however, the kid says to my GF, "Let's go upstairs. I want to show you something cool." While they were playing, they go upstairs together. And rather than going to his room, they go into his parents' room and over to their closet. He opens it and she sees 3 boxes absolutely full of heroin, weed, meth, and a whole bunch of other illegal drugs. My GF closed the closet, took the kid downstairs, and called the cops. The cops arrested the parent and took the child into protective custody. The only thing she knows now is that the parents are still in jail, and the kid is living with his grandmother. I have something similar. I was allergic to most bubble baths and other soap products. My dad, being a single parent at the time, was accused by my doctor at the time of sexually abusing me. I remember when they had to examine me that they asked who I wanted in the room with me, and I bawled since they wouldn't let my dad in the room. Not me, but my mom. She babysat when she was a teenager. And one time she was babysitting these two young boys. The parents were dog trainers, so she also cared for the dogs while they were away. One time, the older boy grabbed a knife and threatened my mom and the younger boy with it. Luckily, those dogs were better trained than the kid was, and one of them jumped in between them and kept the kid with the knife away. I can't remember if she called the cops, but I heard that the kid ended up pretty out of it in his adult life too. Not me, and no police was called. Sorry if this doesn't count. But my family is pretty sure my nanny had drugged me when I was little. I was born with a bad case of eczema that made it near impossible to sleep through the night. Hours of crying on end. It was exhausting for anyone taking care of me. They hired a nanny, and whenever that woman took care of me, nights were silent. My parents at first hoped it was 'cause my skin got better, but later was suspicious. They never did get an answer, as the nanny disappeared off the face of the earth after her final payment. When I was a young teen, I lived in a poor low-income area, and there was a mom that had two little boys I babysat while she worked overnights. Initially, I admired the mom for her dedication and hard work. She was doing the best she could, and honestly my mom and home life were really bad off. I babysat for her quite a few years. She ended up meeting this loser and got pregnant. He was abusive to her, but especially the boys. It was sickening to watch. I ended up leaving the job because we moved, but I did call them in. I don't know whatever happened, but I often think of those boys and hope they're okay. Not a babysitter, but I was babysat, and my mom babysat a lot. One person that babysat me and a few other kids in the early 90s would just leave the house for a couple of hours, leaving us unsupervised. I remember her son would get knives from the kitchen and try to cut us with them, even going as far as to stab his dog. I don't think the cops or CPS were ever called, but I do remember the kid having a lot of issues as he got older, and was eventually arrested for molesting one of his family members. One family of kids my mom babysat when I was around 13 or so would always come over smelling like kerosene. Turned out their mom would pour it on them when they were bad. CPS did get called and they got taken away. Not sure what happened to them after that. I hope they are okay. I called CPS on my own stepmother and father. Father never did anything. Stepmother was a mental and physical abuser. She threatened to send me to my biological mother's, which is worse than me. I told her to do it. She treated my brothers like gold and forged my signature, saying that I lied. She was her education teacher for after school programs. I had to call the girls' parents. We were playing some video games and just joshing around. I nudged her with my hip and she fell off the bench we were sitting on. Only she landed hard on the floor, on her face, and she had a bloody nose lip. I think her tooth broke or chipped too. I felt so bad for that by the end of that summer we decided babysitting wasn't for me lol. Her mom came rushing home and took her to the ER. Everything turned out okay, but man, the guilt was real. 14-year-old me wasn't ready to deal with the blood and almost called 911. My mom does respite for foster kids, so basically babysitting for while the foster parents can't. Anyways, we were watching them. There were 4 girls and 1 boy, all under 13. Anyways, they started saying things in random conversation about what their foster parents, who were friends of ours, would do. The youngest girl, who was 3 at the time, had been molested by her mom's boyfriend and had behavioral issues. No shit. Anyways, the foster parent would punish this 3-year-old girl by forcing her to sleep on metal poles, and wouldn't feed her. She would also scream in her face. That was only what they did to her. So my mom reported her and it caused a lot of drama. BTW, they now live with their dad who has been rehabilitated. They are doing great. We still babysit them from time to time. I have a bit of a reverse one where the babysitter was taken away in handcuffs. It was about 20 years ago now, and my dad's sister had 2 kids who were around 2 and 4. She hired a babysitter for the night so her and her partner could have a date night. Don't know how they found her, but she was not stable enough to handle kids as full on as they were. She ended up drugging them with her antipsychotics and ADHD meds. The parents got home a few hours later and realized something was very wrong. They called emergency services and the kids had to be taken away in an ambulance, and the girl was arrested and charged. It made the news and was crazy as hell, but the kids were okay, but I have no idea how it turned out for the babysitter. I had to call the fire department once. I was babysitting my neighbor's 3 kids, which I did frequently. There was a lit candle in the fireplace mantle. The cat jumped on the mantle and over the candle, catching its long, fluffy tail on fire. It's understandable panic. It set a curtain on fire. With 3 screaming kids and a flaming cat as well as burning window dressing, all I could do was rush everybody outside and call 911. The cat returned about a week later, filthy, half bald and with some infection. A vet visit fixed it up and the damage to the house was relatively minor. Thank God. I continued to sit for them for another 3 years. Edit. Fixed typos. Caught the lady blowing meth into her 21-month-old daughter's face. I exclaimed, "What the hell are you doing?" And she said she didn't want her to grow up fat. Yes. I once babysat a 9-year-old child and his 7-year-old little sister. When I came one day to babysit them, the 7-year-old had bruises and scars all over her face. When I asked the children what happened, the 9-year-old boy said that she hadn't finished all her homework and had been beat by her parents. Beating children is illegal in my country, New Zealand. Almost once. I was about 14 and watching a girl that was 4 for the first time. Mom had a schedule she wanted me to go by, so at 7:30 I told the girl it was bath time. She didn't agree and went to mom's room and grabbed a small 9mm handgun and pulled it on me. I quickly agreed it was in fact not bath time and she could just watch TV. She gave me the gun and went to watch TV. I called my dad, who was half a mile away, and he came straight over. Gun was loaded with the safety off. All that brat had to do was squeeze just a little. So my dad called her mom and told her she had 15 minutes to get home before he called the cops. She showed up 14 minutes later, frazzled but super annoyed that she couldn't go back to work. She didn't give a shit. I never went back. Our babysitter called the cops because my brother was trying to get us in terrible do. He smashed a glass jar and cut himself up with the pieces. He almost lost an eye, slicing his eyelid open the whole time, just laughing his ass off about how we were going to be in so much trouble when mom saw him. I didn't call anyone, but should have. I was watching a kid who was around 9 who told me his dad let him smoke cigarettes. I thought he was just saying it so that I would let him. I didn't. But when the parents came home, the kid told the dad I hadn't let him smoke, and the dad scolded me and gave his child a menthol. He smoked full flavors. I suspect he got menthols literally because his 9-year-old liked them better. The mom is in prison now for some kind of fraud and the kids live with their much older brother. I don't know where the dad is. Dad and mom came home super drunk. Dad started beating the shit out of mom over $20. She yelled from the back bedroom to call the police, so I did. She came out asking me if I really called the cops. Yeah, I did. I was like 13 at the time. Scared me so bad I couldn't look at the dad the same ever again. Even though they were back together not long after. I sat next to a stranger on a plane. And she told me about a case she was working on. She was an advocate for some kids who were repeatedly neglected by their mother. What happened was that a man broke into her house while she was gone, and there were 4 children under 5 years old alone in the house. One of the children walked up to him and asked if he was there to feed them. I guess his paternal instincts kicked in. He told them to go clean themselves up, because apparently they were filthy, while he made what he could find in the kitchen and called the cops on himself. He had the children all sit on the couch while he stood by the door for the cops. The lady from the plane explained that he was going to be given full immunity for saving the children. Not a babysitter. But I was babysat. A bit off topic yet not. But my babysitters used to force me, 5-year-old, to watch their youngest sister pee like a boy. Would often make sexual comments towards me and the younger sister, she was the same age. And often bribed me with the Shrek video game to look at their breasts. At the time I figured this was normal babysitter shit since it was my first time being babysat. But when I spoke to my mum about it she flipped her shit. Never went back and I have no idea what happened to them. It was 2 older kids watching me. 1 co-ed and a high school student. Almost every comment in this thread sends me into a blinding rage. What the FCK kind of monsters hits their 5-year-old with a branch?